The origin of the universe and the Trisolaran worldview. The universe came into being after the Big Bang. At that time, space was 11-dimensional, the speed of light was infinite, and time may have had 2 dimensions. In such an environment, conditions were extremely favorable for life, giving rise to countless civilizations. Civilizations, however, require vast resources to survive and advance. As they competed for these resources, conflicts erupted, eventually escalating into devastating interstellar wars. Over the course of these wars, physical laws themselves were weaponized. 2 of the most destructive weapons were dimensional reduction strikes and light speed reduction strikes. A dimensional reduction strikes collapses a region of higher dimensional space into a lower dimension. When dimensions are reduced, the structure of higher dimensional space is destroyed. Its resources become unusable, and the physical laws change entirely. This delivers catastrophic destruction to the target civilization. A light speed reduction strike, on the other hand, lowers the local speed of light by flattening spatial curvature. Within this zone, both travel and communication speeds are drastically restricted. If the speed of light drops below the escape velocity of a star system, any civilization inside becomes permanently trapped. Both weapons share a fatal flaw. They are uncontrollable. Once a lower dimensional space forms, its lower energy state causes surrounding higher dimensional space to collapse into it, leading to a chain reaction that could reduce the entire universe to a lower dimension. Similarly, regions of reduced light speed can spread outward, gradually slowing the cosmic speed of light everywhere. By the era in which the 3-body problem takes place, the universe was in the midst of a great transition, collapsing from 4 dimensions into 3. Most of space had already become 3-dimensional, with only a few fragments of 4-dimensional spacetime still drifting within it. Meanwhile, the speed of light had settled at 300,000 kilometers per second. The Age of Magic. In 1453, as the Ottoman Empire launched its great assault on Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the city's defenses were on the verge of collapse. At that very moment, a fragment of 4-dimensional spacetime happened to drift near a church within the city. By chance, a courtesan named Theorina, who had sought refuge in the church, stumbled into this fragment and crossed from 3-dimensional space into the 4th dimension. Because 4-dimensional space has an extra spatial coordinate, areas that are sealed off in 3 dimensions are open in 4. One can simply slip through using the additional axis of movement. To ordinary humans, this appeared no different from magic. Realizing the power she had discovered, Theorina went to Emperor Constantine XI and proposed using it to assassinate the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. In return, she demanded to be canonized as a saint. If she succeeded, Constantine XI was skeptical and demanded proof. As a test, he ordered her to kill a heavily guarded prisoner. Entering the 4-dimensional fragment, Theorina bypassed every layer of guards and, in a gruesome demonstration, removed the prisoner's brain directly, killing him instantly. Convinced at last, Constantine agreed to her plan. But just as Theorina prepared to carry out the assassination, the 4-dimensional fragment drifted away from Earth, cutting her off from the higher dimension forever. Her mission failed. Suspicious that she might have been turned by the enemy, the emperor's ministers executed her. Shortly afterward, Constantinople fell, and with it the Byzantine Empire came to an end. Silent Spring. In 1967, during a mass criticism rally at Tsinghua University, physics professor Ye Zhetai was denounced for teaching quantum mechanics. His wife Xiao Lin, though skilled at political maneuvering, was still ostracized because of her family background. In order to prove her loyalty, she too stepped forward to publicly denounce her husband. Ye Zhetai tried to defend himself with scientific reasoning, debating against a group of middle school students. In the end, however, the mob beat him to death. Just days earlier, his second daughter, Ye Wenju, had been gunned down during violent factional fighting. Before long, Xiaolin herself succumbed to the relentless persecution and lost her sanity. Only the elder daughter, Yi Wenji, survived. She was eventually sent to labor at a forestry camp in the Greater Kinnan Mountains. This episode appears slightly differently, depending on the edition of the 3-body problem. In the serialized version and the foreign language editions, it appears right at the very beginning. In the full novel, however, the scene is revealed later, when Wang Miao observes the cosmic flickering, and Ye Wenji's student recalls her past. The novel also omits some of the more graphic details. For instance, in the serialized version, Ye Wenxiu's corpse was impaled on an iron gate and used for target practice by a firing squad, a disturbing scene left out of the book. In 1969, while felling trees at the logging camp, Ye Wenji met Bai Mulin, a journalist visiting the countryside for research. During his investigation, Bai realized that human industrial activity was causing severe environmental damage. Believing that reporting this to the country's top leadership could win him favor, he drafted a confidential report. Because Bai's arms ached from labor and he couldn't write, Ye Wenji transcribed the document for him. The report, however, ran counter to the political climate of the time and was quickly condemned. Since Ye Wenji had acted as scribe, Bai shifted the blame onto her, claiming he had newly passed the document along while she was the true author. As a result, the authorities dispatched Cheng Luo, a special investigator, to look into the matter. Under the guise of interrogating Ye Wenji, Cheng's real aim was to dig up incriminating material on scientists connected to Ye Shitai, particularly those involved in China's nuclear weapons and space program. Such accusations, she believed, could topple prominent figures and advance her own career. She hinted that she could help clear Ye Wenji's name if Ye would accuse some of these scientists. But Ye refused to frame others. In retaliation, Cheng had her drenched with water in the freezing winter cold. Soon after, Ye fell gravely ill with a fever that would not subside. Chapter 4: The Red Coast Project. Ye Wenji awoke from a feverish coma to find herself aboard a helicopter. Two men accompanied her: Lei Zhicheng, the political commissar of Red Coast Base, and Yang Weining, the base's chief engineer. During the Cold War, as the United States and the Soviet Union vied for supremacy, China's relations with both superpowers were fraught with tension. Competition spilled into every field, including the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. According to the contact symbol theory, whichever nation first made contact with an alien civilization might gain a decisive advantage. China could not afford to be left behind. And so, almost as if moving a spare piece in a vast game of chess, the government established Red Coast Base, tasked with searching for life among the stars. Why would contact with aliens be so valuable? First, any nation that reached them might obtain advanced technologies, leaping ahead in development. Second, the first to make contact could act as Earth's intermediary with the aliens, commanding immense political influence. Third, even absent real technology or alien endorsement, the mere claim of contact would provide a potent tool for manipulation. At the time, the mainstream approach was to send messages by radio. Yet one obstacle loomed large: the sun. Solar emissions created overwhelming interference, drowning out signals that might otherwise be detected from other civilizations. To overcome this, research into the sun's structure was essential. Ye Wenji's earlier academic work had made significant contributions in this field. For that reason, despite her political record, she was recruited to Red Coast, pardoned provisionally, with the expectation of atoning through service. The base itself was divided into two circles. Ordinary technicians formed the outer layer. The inner circle consisted of those privy to its most sensitive secrets. Life inside was arduous, and once drawn into the core, there was almost no way out. Most preferred to remain at the periphery, hoping eventually to be reassigned elsewhere. Yang Weining had initially pressed to bring Ye Wenji in, seeing it as a way to shield her from prison and give her temporary safety. His plan was to find an opportunity later to extract her. Commissar Lei, however, viewed Ye with suspicion because of her class background. At first, he deceived her about the base's true mission, telling her it was dedicated to anti-satellite experiments, using high-powered radio waves to disable enemy satellites. But as Ye demonstrated extraordinary technical skill, Lei saw an opportunity. He resolved to exploit her work and claim her research for his own, which meant keeping her at the base permanently. By 1971, 2 years after she had joined, Lei revealed the core secret of Red Coast to her, making her a senior insider. Yang, in contrast, had grown wary. He feared that once she crossed that threshold, she would never leave, bound to the base for life. His attitude toward her cooled. Yet when Lei finally made everything clear to her, Yang's demeanor warmed once more, knowing the matter was settled. Ye Wenji herself regarded Red Coast differently. In the society outside, intellectuals like her struggled to find stable ground. She had lost her family. She had no attachments. Remaining at the base offered at least a secure environment for research. Even knowing that Lei sought to use her, she accepted her role willingly. Chapter 5: Stellar Communication. By 1971, Ye Wenji had learned the true secret of Red Coast Base. Her official assignment was to study the structure of the sun and to devise a way to filter out the solar noise that interfered with the reception of extraterrestrial signals. But in truth, Ye Wenji cared little for the base's mission. What truly interested her was the opportunity to continue her own solar structure research under the cover of military necessity. Liu Cixin understood this perfectly well, but since all of her research results would flow into his hands in the end, he chose to turn a blind eye. In the fall of 1971, while reading through observational reports, Ye came across a paper on Jupiter's emission of electromagnetic radiation. Comparing the report with the data received by Red Coast's monitoring system on the same day, she noticed something strange. Whenever Jupiter emitted radiation, the base picked up two distinct signals, a weak one and a much stronger one, separated by an interval of about 16 minutes, the time it takes a radio wave to travel from Earth to the Sun and back. She deduced that the weak signal was the radiation directly from Jupiter, while the stronger one was the reflection of that signal by the Sun. What truly startled her was that the reflected signal was amplified more than 100 million times in strength. This suggested that the Sun had the ability to act as a natural amplifier of radio waves. To exploit this amplification effect, however, the power of the signal sent toward the Sun had to exceed a certain minimum threshold. And as it happened, Red Coast's transmission system was just strong enough to meet this condition. He realized that part of her earlier models of solar structure could explain the phenomenon, and she became determined to test her hypothesis. There were two possible methods. One was to obtain additional observational reports of Jupiter's radiation from foreign experts and compare the frequency spectrum of those emissions with the solar spectrum received by Red Coast, a nearly impossible task in that era. The other, far simpler test was to transmit a signal directly toward the Sun and see if a magnified echo returned. Yi reported this idea to Liu Cixin, but he immediately vetoed it. For one thing, Liu wanted her to produce papers of little consequence, not to consume scarce resources on bold experiments. For another, in the political climate of the time, aiming radio signals at the Sun was considered deeply inappropriate, even taboo. Still, Yi could not let go of her hypothesis. She secretly carried out the transmission on her own. With no time or manpower to realign the massive base antenna, she had to rely on ordinary radio equipment to receive the return signal at the chosen frequency. But she had not anticipated one detail: when the Sun amplified a signal and also superimposed a sine wave modulation onto it. Because she hadn't accounted for this, the amplified signal fell outside the narrow reception band she had set, and thus nothing was received. Believing her experiment had failed, Yi concluded that her theory was flawed. She abandoned the line of inquiry. In reality, however, the experiment had been a complete success. The signal from Red Coast Base, magnified 100 million times by the Sun, had now begun its journey across the cosmos at the speed of light. Chapter 6. The Trisolaris Expedition. Some 4.3 light-years from Earth, in the Trisolaris system, life was precarious. The hostile environment drove the Trisolarans to yearn desperately for other worlds, for civilizations beyond their own, in hopes of interstellar migration. But the peculiar nature of their three suns denied them a crucial advantage. They could not amplify radio waves. They could only listen passively. And so, thousands of listening posts were built, spread across the planet. At one of these stations, listener 1379 was the first to capture the message sent by Ye Wenji. Her transmission contained a detailed description of Earth's environment, so unlike that of Trisolaris. By standard protocol, 1379 should have sent a reply designed to bait the other party into responding, which would reveal their exact location. He would then report to higher authorities who could dispatch a space fleet to conquer the alien star system and claim it as a colony. But 1379 did not follow protocol. He had his reasons. First, under Trisolaran values and governance, harshly shaped by their brutal environment, his discovery would not be celebrated as a triumph. On the contrary, once the monitoring system had fulfilled its mission, his station would be dismantled, his usefulness ended, and he would be executed. No matter what he did, he would never earn the right to join any interstellar migration. Second, 1379 harbored a quiet resentment toward Trisolaris' authoritarian order. He longed for the kind of life he imagined humans enjoyed, filled with freedom and possibility. If Trisolaris were to invade Earth, exterminate humanity, and impose its own system there, the thought was unbearable to him. So after much hesitation, he made his choice. He sent a reply, a warning. He told Ye Wenji not to answer. In doing so, he betrayed Trisolaris. Receiving Earth's signal alone gave only a direction, not a distance, far too vague to pinpoint the planet. But a reply would change everything. With a signal bouncing back and forth, humans could calculate the Trisolarans' precise location. In theory, Earth itself could mount an invasion. When the supreme leader of Trisolaris learned what 1379 had done, he immediately ordered the formation of a space fleet to depart toward the source of the signal. It was a desperate gamble. The fleet knew only its heading, not the length of the journey or even if it had an end. And yet, the leader did something unprecedented. Instead of executing Listener 1379, he pardoned him. He permitted him to dehydrate into hibernation, so that he might live long enough to witness the destruction of Earth's civilization with his own eyes. From the behavior of both 1379 and Trisolaran leadership, it's clear, at this stage, the Trisolarans had not yet grasped the Dark Forest principle. If they had, they would have realized that listening ghosts were largely meaningless, for most civilizations would hide, never broadcasting recklessly, and their standard tactic, replying to lure the other into revealing itself, would itself expose Trisolaris, a grave taboo in cosmic society. It was only through this fragile thread of contact with humanity that the Trisolarans began to reason their way toward the Dark Forest. Their insight would unfold, almost in parallel with Ye Wenji's own dawning realization. 7. The deaths of Liu Cixin and Yang Weining. After transmitting her message, Ye Wenji continued her life and work at Red Coast Base. In 1973, she married Yang Weining. 8 years later, in 1979, the same year her message reached the Trisolaran system. Trisolaran listener 1379's warning signal finally arrived on Earth. By coincidence, Ye herself was on duty that day. Through the translation system, she received the listener's plea, "Do not respond." As she read the warning, memories surged back. Her father beaten to death for upholding truth, relatives betraying each other, endless scheming and cruelty between people. All of it had left Ye Wenji profoundly disillusioned with human nature and human society. Now confronted with the existence of a civilization so far ahead of humanity in technology, she reasoned that such a people must also surpass Earth in thought, morality, and wisdom. If the Trisolarans ruled Earth, humanity could be uplifted under their guidance. Petty intrigues and human tragedies would vanish. In her eyes, surrendering Earth was not destruction, but salvation. This belief would later become the ideological foundation of the Earth Trisolaris organization. Acting on it, Ye Wenji transmitted a reply to the Trisolarans, revealing Earth's position. Liu Cixin soon learned of the message. Unbeknownst to others, he had secretly installed a backdoor program in Red Coast's computers to monitor all research results, ensuring he could seize credit at the first opportunity. Summoning Yi, he sharply rebuked her, yet urged her to keep silent. In truth, he was blackmailing her. He would conceal her treason, but the honor of first contact with aliens must belong to him. During this exchange, Yi realized that Lei's backdoor only gathered information intermittently, with a time lag. He already knew, listener 1379 had sent a warning, but he had not yet discovered her reply. Once the system updated, her secret would be exposed. The only way out was clear. She had to kill Lei before that happened. Her plan was simple. She loosened a grounding screw to cause an equipment fault. Such faults required dangling a worker on ropes down the mountainside to repair the array. Knowing Wei's temperament, she was certain he would take the lead personally. At that moment, she would only need to saw through the rope to stage an accident. The plan unfolded as intended, until chance intervened. Yang Weining descended alongside Lei. To protect her secret, Yi had no choice but to cut the rope, sending both men to their deaths. That same year, Ye Wenji gave birth to Yang Weining's posthumous son, Yang Dong. Since Yang Dong later became a classmate of Luo Ji, it can be inferred that Luo Ji too was born around 1979. Chapter 8. Evans and the Second Red Coast Base. In 1981, Ye Zhitai was officially rehabilitated, and Ye Wenji returned to her alma mater to teach. Half a year later, while assisting in a survey to select a site for a new radio astronomy observatory, she met Evans, a man who had settled in a remote northwestern mountain village to plant trees. Evans was an environmentalist. His father, a billionaire in the oil industry, had presided over a disaster when one of his tankers sank, devastating the marine ecosystem in that region. Witnessing the suffering of local wildlife left an indelible mark on Evans, turning him toward environmental and animal protection. His tree planting efforts in the mountains were meant to preserve a rare bird species. 3 years later, in 1984, Ye Wenji returned to the village at Evans's invitation. By then, the trees had grown tall, but the local government, declaring that the forest lacked legal protection, moved in to cut it down. Evans was crushed. Though he had by then inherited his father's vast fortune, enough to protect that forest outright, his despair ran deeper. To him, saving one forest meant nothing if he could not protect the rest of Earth's species. Humanity's destructive impulses, he concluded, were far too entrenched. Evans confided in Ye Wenji, lamenting that there was no longer any power capable of changing humankind. Ye, who had long since reached similar conclusions about humanity's darker nature, saw a kindred spirit before her. In that moment of shared disillusionment, she revealed to Evans the existence of the Trisolaris. Armed with this revelation, Evans immediately set his inheritance in motion. He recruited followers, gathered resources, and over the course of 3 years, completed the construction of the second Red Coast base in 1987. Its transmission and reception units were hidden aboard a cruise ship named Judgment Day. When the base was completed, Evans invited Ye Wenji to serve as the commander of the Earth Trisolaris movement. In practice, however, she was its spiritual leader. Evans himself controlled the movement's operations. 9. The Sophim Project. Before explaining the Sophim Project, it's necessary to clarify the timeline and the way we measure age in this story. Because events span both human and Trisolaran history, and later involve near light-speed travel, relativity complicates the chronology. To avoid confusion, we'll use Solar Standard Time. Imagine a clock fixed in the solar system, steadily ticking away. No matter where in the universe an event occurs, its timestamp is whatever that solar system clock shows. For example, when a person reaches DX 3906 at nearly light speed, her arrival time is defined as the moment she'd see on that solar system clock if she could look back instantly. A similar issue arises with age. Because of hibernation technology, biological and chronological ages diverge. Here, we'll use biological age only. Hibernation years don't count. By 1983, the Trisolarans had received Ye Wenji's reply. Because signals took about 8 years to cross the distance, they were finally able to pinpoint Earth. Ye's first transmission had carried about 17 kilobytes of data on human society. For 8 years, the Trisolarans analyzed it and reached a grim conclusion. Human technology was accelerating. In 400 years, when their fleet was due to arrive, humanity might already surpass them. In that case, not only would the fleet be destroyed, but Trisolaris itself could face invasion. Humanity had to be stopped. To suppress Earth's progress, the Trisolarans redirected resources originally earmarked for building a second fleet, and instead launched the Sophon Project. Chapter 10. The Sophon Project. Here we need another key concept. In interstellar warfare, a dimensional strike doesn't simply erase dimensions. It compresses them to the microscopic scale. Take four-dimensional space as an example. A dimensional reduction compresses one of its axes into the structure of subatomic particles. Those particles now contain hidden dimensions, but can no longer form higher dimensional objects. As explained in the third book, they transform into what we know in 3 dimensions as protons and electrons, the building blocks of our universe. The Trisolarans' mastery of physics was vast. They could manipulate 9 of the universe's 11 dimensions. They learned to unfold the compressed dimensions hidden within microscopic particles. Even a single particle, once unfolded, revealed enormous space. A proton, when expanded into 2 dimensions, could cover the entire surface of Trisolaris. Later, phenomena like ball lightning were explained as the 3-dimensional unfolding of electrons. But this did not mean the Trisolarans could reverse dimensional strikes on a cosmic scale. There were limits. First, unfolding dimensions consumed staggering amounts of energy. Even their massive particle accelerators could only unfold a single proton. It was like the second law of thermodynamics. Just as heat flows naturally from hot to cold, restoring order requires extra input. Air conditioners cool a room, but only by burning energy elsewhere. Second, information was lost in the dimensional collapse. Like compressing an image file into a lossy format, unfolding it later could never restore its original clarity. Still, the Trisolarans pressed on. They unfolded 2 dimensions within a proton, etched circuits onto its surface, and transformed it into a computer. The process was arduous, delicate, and perilous. After years of effort, by 1990, they completed the first Sophon. A Sophon had extraordinary abilities. It could fly freely at near light speed. It could expand or contract its internal dimensions at will. It could carry vast stores of data. While a lone Sophon in its contracted state was inaccessible, multiple Sophons could communicate through quantum entanglement, enabling faster-than-light messaging. Over the following years, 4 more Sophons were completed. Only with at least 4 could they form a stable communication network. Once finished, all sophons were compressed back to the microscopic scale. In 2001, 2 of them were sent to Earth. Chapter 11. The Earth Rebels. In 1987, Evans built the second Red Coast base and sent new messages to the Trisolaris world, along with large amounts of information about human society. This marked the beginning of cooperation between Trisolaris and the Earth Trisolaris organization ETO. The Trisolarans provided ETO with advanced technology, while ETO's single mission was simple: block the progress of Earth's science and technology. The methods they used were familiar and usually fell into a few categories: using movements like environmentalism to stir distrust of science and slow down progress, sabotaging major scientific projects, assassinating key scientists, and suppressing new discoveries, creating strange, unexplainable phenomena to disturb researchers' minds and discourage their work. As ETO grew, it split into 3 factions: the Adventists, the Redemptionists, and the Survivors. The Adventists, like Wenji at first, wanted the Trisolarans to come to Earth, take over humanity, and raise human civilization to a higher moral level, building a better world together. But Evans himself had a deeply anti-human mindset. He hated humanity and secretly wanted the Trisolarans to wipe out people entirely, then live peacefully on Earth alongside other species. He hid this true belief from Wenji, but under his influence, the Adventist faction eventually turned just as extreme as him. The Redemptionists were different. They felt pity for the tragic situation of the Trisolaran world and developed almost a religious devotion toward them. They hoped the 2 civilizations could coexist, even dreaming of solving the Trisolaran crisis, so that they would not need to invade the solar system. If the Redemptionists succeeded, the Adventists' plan to destroy humanity would collapse. This made the 2 factions bitter enemies at their core. The Survivors were the weakest faction. They were made up of low-ranking members who had no real beliefs. Their only goal was to serve the Trisolarans in exchange for better treatment after Earth's takeover. To put it simply, the early Adventists were like public intellectuals. Later, Adventists turned into anti-nationals. The Redemptionists were idealistic humanitarians, and the Survivors were just collaborators. Since Evans founded ETO and controlled the second Red Coast base, the Adventists held the most power in the early years. Their communication with Trisolaris was originally through radio signals, but once the Sophons arrived on Earth in 2005, radio contact ended and was replaced by real-time communication through sophons. Most of the records and data of this communication were kept tightly in the hands of the Adventists. Later, the Redemptionists grew stronger, especially through recruiting people with the Trisolaran video game, and soon clashed with the Adventists. As for the Survivors, they just drifted along without much influence. Chapter 12. Ball Lightning. Here's some background on ball lightning. The 3-body problem borrows and expands on its concepts, but the 2 stories don't fully share a timeline. Think of them as parallel universes, or as if physicist Ding Yi carried some of ball lightning's story into 3-body. What follows is only the parts of ball lightning that tie into 3-body. In 2004, meteorologist Dr. Chen and a military officer, Lin Yun, teamed up to develop ball lightning as a new kind of weapon. They strung an electric arc between 2 helicopters and swept it across the sky during flight, and successfully created ball lightning. To dig deeper into the phenomenon, they brought in physicist Ding Yi. Ding Yi discovered that ball lightning is actually an excited state of macroelectrons. According to the 3-body worldview, space dimensions are hidden inside fundamental particles after being compressed by dimensional strikes. Under certain conditions, these hidden dimensions can be unfolded again, like with the sophons. In nature, some particles also reveal extra dimensions. For example, a 3-dimensionally unfolded electron can be the size of a soccer ball, invisible and floating in the air, with so little mass that people can't feel it. But when struck by lightning, these expanded electrons absorb energy, enter an excited state, and glow, what we see as ball lightning. This explains many strange effects of ball lightning. Since these macroelectrons still follow wave-particle duality, they can pass through walls. When they fall back from the excited state, they release energy that can kill humans or damage buildings. Sometimes the released energy only interacts with certain materials. That's why victims may be burned to ash while their clothes remain untouched. Chapter 12. Ball lightning. A ball lightning attack is actually a quantum attack. Victims enter a superposition between alive and dead, just like Schrödinger's cat. Their final outcome depends on observation. Other people nearby almost always observe them as dead, pushing the result toward death. But because humans have consciousness, victims can briefly observe themselves as alive, which is why they sometimes linger in a ghost-like state. During this period, they may leave faint traces or messages visible to others. Still, their ability to affect reality is thought to be extremely limited. After uncovering the secret of ball lightning, Ding Yi fell in love with Lin Yun. Later, war broke out. Lin Yun pushed to use ball lightning as a weapon, but interference from the enemy prevented success. After the failure, Ding Yi discovered that atomic nuclei also had a macro-expanded state. In this state, simply accelerating two nuclei to about 200 meters per second could trigger nuclear fusion, releasing energy far greater than ball lightning. Lin Yun was obsessed with weapons. Despite opposition, she defied orders and triggered macroatomic fusion herself. The blast caused huge losses on both sides, forcing peace negotiations. Lin Yun, however, was consumed by the reaction, dissolving into a quantum ghost and fading into nothing. Chapter 13. Yang Dong's death. First, let's talk about the crisis era in Three Body. The first year of the Trisolaris crisis should be 2007. Based on details in the first novel, it's clear. Yi Wenji died 38 years after 1969, which places the crisis era correctly in 2007. By this time, Ding Yi was in a relationship with Yang Dong, Ye Wenji's daughter, and the two were close to buying a house and getting engaged. Yang Dong herself had become a promising theoretical physicist. Together, she and Ding Yi were working on the Liangshan particle accelerator project, where one of the goals was to test a foundational physics model she had proposed. But by then, the Sophons had already arrived on Earth. They infiltrated particle accelerators, replacing the target particles during collisions and interfering with experiments. The results appeared completely chaotic and random, making it impossible for humanity to build reliable physical theories. Yang Dong, unaware of the Sophons' interference, only saw that the experiments kept failing. This planted deep doubts in her about physics itself. One day, by chance, Yang Dong discovered files on Ye Wenji's computer that hadn't been deleted. In them, she learned a shocking truth. Other civilizations existed, and her own mother was connected to the Trisolarans, serving as the leader of the Earth Trisolaris organization. Shaken, Yang Dong later had a conversation with a computer engineer from the accelerator project. He showed her a simulation program of Earth's evolution. The program demonstrated that if you factored in life as a variable, Earth's development diverged dramatically from a lifeless model. This revelation struck her deeply. She realized that life itself, whether on Earth or elsewhere, could shape the environment and even influence the universe. Combined with the chaotic accelerator experiments, Yang Dong came to a chilling conclusion. The laws of physics in the universe may have already been tampered with by alien civilizations. As a theoretical physicist, this meant that no matter how hard she worked, she could never uncover the true, original laws of the universe. The crushing despair of this realization, coupled with the betrayal she felt upon learning of her mother's hidden role, was unbearable. Under this double blow, Yang Dong chose to end her life. Chapter 14. Wang Miao and the Frontiers of Science. The Earth Trisolaris Organization, ETO, began spreading its activities worldwide. Through campaigns that stirred up environmental movements, sabotaged scientific projects, and even assassinated scientists, they worked tirelessly to halt humanity's scientific progress. After the World Year of Physics in 2005, the ETO created a group called the Frontiers of Science. On the surface, it appeared to be a loose academic society where scientists could exchange ideas. In reality, its goal was far darker: to confuse scientists, shake their confidence, and lead their research astray. Most of their targets were theoretical physicists. But there was one exception: Wang Miao, the main character of the first novel. Wang Miao specialized in applied nanomaterials. His research had potential applications in building a space elevator, a breakthrough that could accelerate humanity's leap into space, something the Trisolarans wanted to prevent. For that reason, Wang Miao came under their watch and was invited to join the frontiers of science. As ETO operations expanded, governments around the world began to notice. By sharing intelligence, they realized they were all facing the same hidden enemy. Though its face was still unknown, its purpose was clear: to cripple human science. This common threat drove countries to cooperate. In China, a battle command center was established under the leadership of General Chang Wisi. Chang Wisi brought in an old subordinate, Shi Qian, a Beijing police officer. She was highly capable but had a checkered past. Because of this, he was brought into the command center with restrictions. He was there to do the legwork, not to handle intelligence. Chapter 15. Frontiers of Science. Several scientists who had joined the Frontiers of Science committed suicide. When the military discovered that Wang Miao had also been invited to join, they sent Shi Qian to recruit him for the investigation. Wang Miao arrived at the command center and was shocked. The meeting wasn't just filled with scientists. It also had NATO and US observers present. Clearly, something was very wrong, despite the world appearing peaceful on the surface. During the meeting, Ding Yi explained the circumstances surrounding Yang Dong's suicide. General Chang wanted Wang Miao to accept the invitation to join the Frontiers of Science and serve as an undercover agent. Both Ding Yi and Wang Miao, as scientists, were skeptical. They didn't believe the organization was a threat, and the military's immediate assumption of guilt frustrated Wang Miao. At first, he flatly refused. That's when Shi Qian stepped in. With a mocking tone, he suggested that if Wang Miao went in, he'd probably end up like the other scientists, fooled into suicide. Wang already disliked Shi, and this provocation struck a nerve. Fueled by pride, he agreed to join the Frontiers of Science, not to spy, but to prove the military and Shi Qian wrong. That evening, Wang Miao met with Ding Yi again to better understand Yang Dong's death. Using a simple billiards analogy, Ding Yi explained the grim truth. High-energy particle experiments had begun producing chaotic, meaningless results. At the microscopic level, it seemed like the laws of physics no longer held. This, he said, was why so many physicists had lost hope and taken their own lives. Meanwhile, after successfully baiting Wang Miao into the investigation, Shi Qian began secretly tailing him, tasked with keeping him under surveillance and protecting him if necessary.